Hi, I'm Miss Kyra from Letters and Leaves, and in this video, I'm going to give you 5 minutes or under directions and explanations about how to write a conclusion paragraph. So, let's get into it. A conclusion paragraph, as a writer, is the hardest thing for me to write because I get to the end of my essay and I think, I've already said everything that I need to say. What else is there? And I totally understand that sentiment. However, you've probably just said a lot of different subpoints that all relate to this overarching topic within your thesis. And so your conclusion is a way to bring all of that back together, summarize it all, bring it back to that main point, say everything that you said, but that gets a little bit boring and you feel like you're just repeating yourself. So another way to think about a conclusion is to think that this is your last chance to tell your audience, to tell your reader what they need to do with this information, with this argument, with this insight that you just gave them into the topic, into the text, into whatever. So I like to think of conclusions as a last chance for me to appeal to the reader, for them to do something, to think about something more deeply, to take action if I'm writing that type of essay, to change their mind or to read the text themselves. So this is your last chance to maybe convince your teacher that you said everything that you needed to say. So conclusion, although difficult to write and sometimes it feels repetitive, is very important. It's your last chance. So with that said, let's talk about some things that you can do in your conclusion. In your conclusion, there's actually different styles of conclusions, and I'll probably make another video where I talk about those, but overall, what people tend to do and what works pretty well is to restate in a new way your thesis statement. So the other thing that you want to do when you're starting out your conclusion is use some transitional language. In conclusion is probably the most obvious, and I would say that there are other ways to do it, but to begin with, in a rough draft, you can say in conclusion and just get it out there so it exists. In conclusion, and then restate your thesis in a new way. From there, you can do a couple of sentences where you summarize the main idea from your body paragraphs. That's typically what I tend to do, is I'll restate my thesis in the first sentence of my conclusion. So that's part one that you could do. The second part, it actually takes up a couple of sentences. I try to write one sentence that summarizes the main point of each body paragraph that I had. So if I had 3 body paragraphs, it's 3 sentences right there where I'm gonna explain the main ideas. And then from there, I try to make a clear lesson, a clear so what for the reader that I haven't necessarily said yet, but it's not necessarily a new conclusion that I would have to prove. So if I was writing about the book that I was reading, then I would think about to myself, what are some lessons that I learned as a reader that I've kind of hinted at with some of the evidence that I've used, that this book really is well known for? What is something that really stuck with me that I haven't explicitly or outright said yet, but that still makes sense within the frame of my paper, what I've already said? So I might say, if we're talking about the hero's journey and we're talking about the Odyssey, for example, then I talked about why I think Odysseus is an epic hero. Why is he actually a hero? So I've restated my thesis, I've restated the main points or summarized the main points in a couple of sentences, and then I have, oh, that's really short for a conclusion, I need a little bit more. So I think the lesson there could be, why do we need heroes? Why is Odysseus, thousands of years later, still somebody that we read about, still somebody that we question, is he a hero or isn't he? I would bring up something about that idea and wrap it up and give the reader one last thing to chew on, to think about. So a good way to end your conclusion is handing it over to the reader, inviting them into this conversation. What are they going to think about next? That is one way to write a conclusion, and I would say those are the main components. So again, restating your thesis, summarizing your main ideas, and then handing it over to the reader, giving them a lesson, giving them one last thing to think about as they walk away from your paper. So in under 5 minutes, that is the basics of a conclusion. Happy writing.